Hello everyone, Jules here. Today I'd like to talk about a book, quite interesting book, that's been published in recent years about Kabbalah. And the book is called Kabbalah with a subtitle Secrecy, Scandal and the Soul. This book is by Freedman and it's a hardcover book. And this was published about 4 years ago, so it's fairly recent. And I wanted to talk about this book today because it's a bit different to other books about Kabbalah that I have seen. And I really like the way that this is written. And I particularly wanted to talk about this one today because it's a great overview about Kabbalah. And it's also a cultural view, which is really interesting to have a book written about Kabbalah as a subject, but particularly looking at this from a cultural and social perspective, as well as a historical view as well. The other books that I have on Kabbalah or have seen, you can get some very good books about the history of Kabbalah, but they don't seem to include an overall cultural and social approach, which this book does. So I really like that. So this is a hardcover book. It's not too thick, but quite a lot is covered in this book. Freedman is quite a good author and he's written quite a few books. I think this is the only one about Cabala, as far as I know. But he knows Kabbalah very well, and he's also written about Kabbalah from an academic perspective as well. So he really does know quite a lot about Kabbalah. So I'm going to talk about what's in this book, and it also has some colour plates in here in the middle of the book. And there's one in particular that I'm going to show you. It's a photograph or a painting of Eliphas Levi, and I've never seen this particular one before, so it may have come from a painting. It's dated 1874. So I hope you'll be able to see this. So with the hardcover it's a little bit difficult, but it's this picture here of Eliphas Levi. Looks like it's from a painting. So I haven't seen that. I haven't seen that before. I've seen very old photographs, kind of a full length, almost a full length photograph of Eliphas Levi before, but I have never seen that one of a portrait, closer facial portrait. So that's interesting just to start with. So I'll talk about what's in the book. And the other thing about this book too is that it goes completely up to modern day, which I think a lot of books about Kabbalah don't necessarily do that either. A lot of books would go up as far as Hermetic Kabbalah of the Golden Dawn, which is the Victorian period, and they might tend to sort of leave it there. But this book goes into modern day and even contemporary times. So that's another reason why I really like this book, because of the overall view and the overall period of time that's covered. So I think that's great. So there's it starts off with a very good introduction, and it's an introduction that I really do think is worth reading because Freedman is such a good author that it will throw even more perspective on this book. Then after the introduction, there is the origins of Kabbalah, which is very interesting. Just before I get into the contents, something I wanted to talk about just briefly about the subtitle of the book, Secrecy, Scandal and the Soul. So the secrecy part is just to do with the esoteric teachings that were originally only available to a small number of people and followers of the Kabbalah. Scandal is really interesting. That's to do with contemporary times. So a lot of people will not know about the scandal part. And of course the soul, because Kabbalah is mysticism and it's completely about the soul in relation to the structure and concepts of Kabbalah. So I just thought I'd better talk about that subtitle. So back to the contents. So after you got introduction, then the origins of Kabbalah, because it was an oral tradition before it was written down. So we're talking about Jewish Kabbalah here to start with, because that is the origin of Kabbalah. Then after you go to the origins of Kabbalah, then the beginning of Kabbalah. And that is up until the Zohar, when it became written. So that's the beginning of the Kabbalah as a type of a spirituality and mysticism. The beginning of printing sort of takes you up to the Renaissance time, from the medieval up to Renaissance time. The next chapter is Christian Kabbalah, which has got a lot to do with the person, the very well-known esoteric or metaphysical writer, Cornelius Agrippa. But he wasn't the only one, but one of the main people. Then after Christian Kabbalah, it goes into the city of mystics. Then you get to Kabbalah and the occult sciences. So this is all to do with what was going on with the occult or esoteric side of Kabbalah, which coincided with Christian Kabbalah. And that is where you have the beginning of Kabbalah as a form of magic as well as ritual. This is where that was just starting to happen. There's a chapter on the golem. That's a very, very interesting chapter. Then there's a chapter on good, evil, and the life of the soul. So these concepts in relation to Kabbalah. And then what happened after that, sort of at the end of the Renaissance period, there was a decline. And then there was a revival in the 18th century, in the 1700s, which was the foundation of the Hasid movement. So this is where you have the Jewish mysticism as an actual European movement. After that chapter, you have the occult revival, which has got everything to do with Eliphas Levi to start with. This is the French esoteric occult revival. And then around the same time, shortly afterwards, you have, of course, the Golden Dawn, and English Hermetic Kabbalah, as opposed to the French Hermetic Kabbalah. Hermetic Kabbalah. And then the last 2 chapters are on the modern and contemporary period. And this is where it's talking about New Age type of Kabbalah. So a lot of people in pop culture may know about the contemporary form of Kabbalah. And the author basically explains what that's about and actually says why, for him personally, he's not in favour of that and why, which I think is a great idea. For me personally, I'm not going to judge what other people do with their different forms of Kabbalah that they work with or practice. I'm not going to make any personal judgment about that, but I tend to agree with the author, so I will say that. Then at the end of the book, there is an appendix, which is a very brief outline of the Sephirot. You have quite a good glossary, notes, bibliography, and an index. I think it's about 270 pages, but there's a lot in here. I just love the way all of this has been covered and the way it's been done, and taking it right up to basically present day, and 280 pages. I really like this. I mean, I've got several books on Kabbalah and on different types of Kabbalah, because a lot of people mainly know about Jewish Kabbalah or Hermetic Kabbalah. They may not know as much about Christian Kabbalah or the more contemporary sort of New Age forms of Kabbalah. There's different forms of Kabbalah. I wanted to get this book because it is different in the way that it's been written. I think the cultural and social perspective is really important. It gets a little bit dry if you're just talking about the history of Kabbalah, but if you're going to include a cultural and social perspective like this author does, I think that's really worthwhile, and it actually makes the book more interesting. I tend not to have too many I'm not as likely to buy many more books on Kabbalah unless there's a really good reason. And for this book, this is a good reason for me. So for the reasons that I've mentioned, I think it's worth getting, especially for people who want a really good overview that is not just a historical view and takes it right up to present day. So I think this is a great book, and it's not too expensive either. I don't have many hardcover books, so that's another reason why I'm careful when I am purchasing a hardcover book. It's not too thick. It's a reasonably accessible book, actually, even though there's a lot of information in here. It's still quite an accessible book because of the way that the author has written the book. So I think this book is really quite worthwhile for people who want a really good overview and want to learn about the other types of Kabbalah, not only throughout history but including what's around now. So this is Kabbalah by Harry Freedman, Secrecy, Scandal and the Soul. I'll put some details below the video. It's quite easy to get, and I'm really glad I got this book, and I wanted to talk about this today just to let people become aware of this publication. So I'll put some details below the video. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.